Ooh, man, that makes me cringe. I hate office politics. Wow, this person's getting very philosophical. It is not for everyone, apparently so. Have you heard about our culture? The one about not tolerating brilliant jerks. Hello, and welcome back to another video. My name is Preston. I'm a professional recruiter in the technology industry. In this video, we're gonna talk about the company Neflix and whether people at Netflix, do they actually chill or do they work? But before we get started, if you're as excited as I am to dig in, please give us a like, subscribe, click that bell. It would really mean a lot. Please also keep in mind to take a lot of these reviews and experiences with a grain of salt. A lot of these are taken from Glassdoor.com, and let's dive in and get started. This is the homepage here on Netflix and Glassdoor.com. You can see that this company is massive, located in Los Gatos, California, founded in 1997, doing about $5 to $10 billion in revenue according to Glassdoor. They're a public company. Their ticker is NFLX, and they have between 5,000 and 10,000 employees. And in case you've never heard of Netflix, they are the world's leading streaming entertainment service with 193 million paid memberships in over 190 countries, enjoying TV series, documentaries, feature films across a wide variety of genres and languages. Not sure if this is current right now, but this is what they have at Glassdoor. Now, let's dig in for the reviews here. A little over 2,000 reviews. We like to kind of see what they talk about in terms of the overall rating. So out of about a little over 2,000 reviews, people have given the company 4.3 out of 5 stars, which compared to other companies that we've talked to about so far, and if you haven't seen those, make sure you check them out. We're doing a quick high-level snapshot and experience reviews of the big tech FAANG companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, sometimes Microsoft, but this is relatively really high. 87% recommend Netflix to their friends, which is, wow, very high. 90% approve the CEO. Good job, Netflix. And the CEO is Reed Hastings. He has about 975 rating. So as always, we're gonna sort these reviews with under popular, which is the default tier, and let's get started. This person has given Netflix a 5-star and fairly recent. This person's a content editorial specialist out of Los Gatos, California. Out of 5 stars, everything has gotten 4.5 except cultures and values and compensation. Nice. Pros, lots of freedom and autonomy to do my best work. I love that. People always want freedom. People want autonomy. They don't want to be in an environment or team that just has very intense micromanagement. Awesome. We are empowered to contribute our ideas, opinions, and also when we want to work. They're empowered to contribute their ideas and opinions. Awesome. I think that's fantastic. And also when they want to work. So I guess if you do a good enough job there and you hit your milestones and goals, they're not real sticklers in terms of just like your overall hours. So I'm assuming if you want to work more on the first half of the day, second half of the day, you're more of a morning person, late in the evening person, I guess it doesn't matter if you do good work. And I love this. I think it's not so much about how much you work, it's about just what sort of output that you're doing and how great of a kind of work that you are kind of putting out on a consistent day-by-day basis. That should be the most important metric of analyzing your productivity or just overall productivity of a team, instead of like, hey, did you clock in 9 and clock out 5? Cons. Nothing stays constant for long. So even though they're a massive company, it still seems like it goes fast-paced, things are changing, perhaps new projects start, and then these projects quickly end, they quickly shift, pivot. It's very normal in the tech industry for companies to do this. It becomes a little bit less normal the bigger the company gets, but I think even though there are large companies out there, a lot of them function and do their best in a very lean startup way, or maybe there are new startup teams within these massive companies that just go fast-paced. So even though the broad stroke generalization is that, there's less chaos, less pivoting at bigger companies, that really depends on what you do and what team and what department you're at. That can determine whether or not that stays true or is different. Frequent changes to teams and work processes. So again, just exactly what I said before, but it doesn't seem like it's really too scathing at this point. I really love the pros. Let's move on. Oh boy, this is a long one. All right, this person has given Netflix a 3 out of 5. Work-life balance 2, culture 1. Career opportunities great, compensation great, no surprise there. Big tech pays really well. But you have to ask yourself, if you're paying so well and your benefits are so amazing, what is the flip side? What are you expecting from your team? What are you expecting from employees? Senior management 4. Okay, so career, compensation, senior management's good. Now for this person, culture and work-life balance is where Netflix is really struggling. This person remains anonymous. Again, please keep in mind this was written in 2018, so things could be a little bit different. They do not recommend, they approve CEO, and they approve of the business outlook. Okay, Pros, paycheck, yes. Netflix is known to pay super well. In fact, if you're in tech or you're thinking about tech, you'd have heard of like equity or stock or RSUs a lot in the back end. In our industry, you don't normally just get just one salary benefits. Typically, you get some sort of equity or stock options or RSUs in the back end. From what I've heard at Netflix is that typically at other companies, when you join, they, depending on your experience or leveling, they would already have allocated a certain amount of equity or RSUs to give you, a bonus to give you, depending on your seniority and what you actually do, what team you're on, etc. In Netflix, apparently, you can select how much of your overall total comp is salary and how much is bonus. And there's literally a sliding scale that you can choose one or the other. If you are at Netflix right now, you've worked at Netflix, you know people at Netflix and the corporate team, please let me know if that's true, because I think that's really, really cool. And I think it's also great to empower them to select what they want, right? Some people value cash, straight up cash more. Others want the long-term incentives or equity and bonus more. Some just want a nice little balance in between, and to be able to kind of give the opportunity to choose, I think that's fantastic. So many good people, obviously. It's very rigorous interview process and recruiting, great service, and pro, hope. I guess he just has a lot of hope in the company or himself. Now, we have an essay here. I'm gonna do my best to paraphrase. Cons. This person's been working at Netflix for a long time. I've seen what was supposed to be very mature people sharing absolutely almost no contact that anyone would qualify as human. Sure, that sounds hyperbolic, but let me develop and maybe cherry pick a little bit. Okay, have you heard about our culture? The one about giving candid feedback. I have seen people complain of behavior they literally demonstrate themselves in the following days. I mean, that's just not great for morale. It's very hypocritical if especially a person of authority is like, hey, this is what you should not do, and then this same person does it in the following days. That's a big no-no. But I've also seen these feedbacks resulting in tears both in the eyes of HR persons or fellow engineers. How human does that sound? Have you heard about our culture? The one about not tolerating brilliant jerks. I have nonetheless seen angriness and frustration expressed in private and public meetings, people rejecting new ideas by default, like any ideas they wouldn't have worked themselves on for days wouldn't count, even if those ideas from the best examples in the industry or academics. How many publications, contributions have you seen from Netflix to computer science in general? How does it compare against any other company of that size? Can you imagine either the real insecurity or the lack of innovation that could lead to this situation? Except for a few managers, directors, or VPs feeling free enough to behave at work in the same way than how they live, almost every engineer I have been interacting with have shared as little as possible about their private life. The rare exceptions of interpersonal exchange ends up around some sort of competitive behavior. Who is the most geeky, sportive, owns the fastest car, biggest house, visited the strangest place? I've heard workaholic people complaining about ambitious peers who are over-managing or overworking to get even more work to do after that. I feel like we're past workaholism at this point. So a couple things, what we talked about before about people it's some sort of culture that people are just not comfortable talking about what they do, what they like, that just the human element of their identity aside from work. Then maybe, I don't know, maybe this is like an anomaly example, or depending, again, it can depend on the team and department you're in, but every company strives to create a very safe, inclusive culture where you are comfortable saying things and not be afraid of the immediate repercussions, right? So I think, yeah, this is a big red flag if this is pervasive throughout the entire company and culture. But again, don't want to generalize, don't want to have tremendous broad strokes. This is just this person's specific example. Now, the second feedback that I want to talk about is I've heard workaholic people complaining about ambitious peers who are over-managing and they get even more work to just move themselves forward. This is exactly what I'm talking to and alluding to before. Big tech, even though as prestigious as they are, people that are extremely smart, people that get paid well. Why? Because they work really, really hard. And I think that also becomes a self-perpetuating cycle that if you work really, really hard, it's gonna make sure all your other peers will wanna work really, really hard. Then it becomes a very intense, cutthroat environment where to get ahead, you have to just outwork, outproduce your peers, which are already working relatively really hard relative to the average or general industry that we're in. So it becomes for a lot of people this cycle where they feel like it's never ending and it can result in burnout, it can result in them just being overwhelmed. And unfortunately, this is, I would say, like a dark side of Netflix, but this also happens at so many other companies as well. And I think this is definitely something that should be tackled or communicated more about. Let's see, maybe there are a lot of shy people. Maybe there's a culture of fear, not only of being fired, but also fear of interacting with people going to be fired. Maybe it's all in my mind. Maybe giving 5 stars to their experiences here, don't care the human aspect of a company, and maybe they're right. What about your crush, your fears, your desires for the future, your appetite for life? Wow, this person's getting very philosophical. I've been blessed to work in enough large companies and know that the behavior that I'm seeing in Netflix is also not a healthy one. I've also been lucky enough to work in other industries, more socializing than tech, and I can know Netflix has a lot to do on that side, and offsites or team meetings won't solve that problem. I'm afraid about the tragic but inevitable consequences of the ways people operate in this company. I guess at the day the worst will happen, it will be addressed in an impersonal memo by Reed, followed by 1 to 2 reminders during offsites, possibly commented by HR on a Q&A document, and move on. This company seems reactive in its management of people as it's proactive in its business operations. So despite everything, what's really surprising is this person still works at Netflix, not only for the paycheck, but because I hope it will change. This is what he or she means by saying hope here. They hope for change. The needed change can't happen from a canned feedback, Q&A, or only from inside. Change has to come from everyone, including people who take time to read comments like this one. Netflix has so many good people and offers such a great service. As a curious Netflix employee reading this review, think about your past. There isn't a big human thing that you would love to feel again in your current company that you felt in the past. So according to this person, you're just not gonna feel human at Netflix. I hope that's not true. That's very, very unfortunate. I'm sorry this person has gone through this. As a candidate, think about what would be a good question to ask to the HR partner once your package is almost ready to be offered to you. Think about that comment you make at the end of the interview when you're being asked by an engineer, do you have any questions for me? What Netflix needs is an inception, something that anyone and everything would think about after leaving their call or the room they were sharing with you. Ask yourself and then the others the questions you should ask if you think you want to spend a good amount of life and energy in the places you're applying for. Will I learn and contribute to the knowledge of others, even outside the company? Will I see emotional responses from my peers? Will that be for other reasons than being fired or bluntly criticized? Will I find a friendly environment that will nurture my appetite for life? What is the amount of emotional interaction to expect from a company whose service is the best to entertain? Do androids dream of electric sheep? I think these questions are really, really good. And I'm really glad this person brought up this topic, because when you're interviewing for a company, aside from easily getting carried away from the glitz and glamour and the prestige or the brand or the name, it's really also important to know, like, what will you actually do there? The basic stuff. Who will your managers be? And then like try to be creative and maybe use these questions as an inspiration to understand, like, what is the culture really like within like the micro dynamic of your team, to maybe a step further, a level out to maybe your department, to your all the way up to the leadership, to how, you know, the culture is maintained and felt throughout the entire company. And I think when you get a new job, you of course do so with the hope that you stay there for a very long time. And I think there are a lot of reasons why people leave jobs, aside from the money, aside from the manager. And a lot of it is the culture. A lot of it is like, are you fulfilled? Are you being respected? Are you being acknowledged or listened to? And so my biggest recommendation is, if you're going through the interview process right now, you're thinking about going in the future, try to spend some extra time and really asking, like, what do you really want in another job? What sort of atmosphere, environment do you excel in, or do you conflict with? What sort of leadership and communication styles are you hoping to kind of have your future company to implement? Or what sort of communication styles really irk you or get under your skin and you're like, hey, if this happens like this, I can't even last 30 days, right? And so you want to do whatever you can to set yourself up for success. I think on one hand, it's great that this person is still at Netflix to be hopeful, but on the other hand, I also see an unfortunate situation where this person is stuck. They have the golden handcuffs. They're paid super well. Not to mention, he or she hasn't even talked about the perks and benefits. And if you work hybrid in the office of Netflix, the offices are supposed to be absolutely incredible. And this is the same thing for any big tech fan companies out there, where they just want to do their best to keep the employees and teams on site working as hard and long hours as possible just to kind of keep them in. The ideal scenario is that you're happy, everything's working out well, but I think this is really just an honest take of someone's experience, that despite everything, despite the prestige, you know, Netflix, like any companies, has their own issues. And if a lot of this really resonates with you, like, you want to make sure that if you do apply to a company like Netflix, that you ask questions. And if a lot of this really turns you off and you're thinking about applying for Netflix, I just hope that maybe you can just make the extra effort and try to get in touch with people who've been at Netflix to see if this is, you know, issues that are still relevant and current today. Again, like, this was written in 2018, so hopefully the company has improved over time. This person, a movie crew, scout for scene selection pros. I travel around the world in first class, take extra days off at desired locations. Wow. To go from like the previous ratings to this, I mean, this sounds amazing. First class to extra days off, like, it sounds incredible. I don't seem to find too many at the moment. When I do, I will respond appropriately. This person gives Netflix a 5 stars out of 5. Wow, really cool. This person, interesting, director of product design out of California. They like the business outlook, they approve the CEO, and they recommend it. Basically a 5-star out of everything except just work-life balance and career opportunities. I hope this person touches more on my career opportunities because I'm really kind of curious to see what he or she says. Pros. This was written earlier this year. Netflix has been a wild and wonderful ride. The people are top-notch, the culture is uniquely candid, and yet very human. So unlike the previous comment, according to this director of product design, he or she has a very human experience. So perhaps there is hope for Netflix that over the past several years, they definitely made the necessary improvements. And they're deeply committed to being the most diverse, inclusive, and all-around excellent team of humans on the planet. You couldn't even get to a further 180-degree opposite feedback than what we just heard. But this also makes me hopeful too. I have been consistently impressed, challenged, and inspired every day of my time with Netflix. It has been the most impactful role I've ever taken, and I'll be learning on the learnings from my time at Netflix for the rest of my career. Cons. It is not for everyone, apparently so. If you need stability, clear processes, rules, or structure, Netflix can be a very stressful place. But Preston, you keep saying big companies like Netflix have stability, processes, rules, structure. Yes, but again, it also depends on what you do at this company, your organization, your team, your manager, your leadership. But I also want to add and remind you that a lot of these big companies, it's highly competitive, and you will have to work hard. You have to be on top of your A game, literally 24/7. And if you're not, you can quickly become placed on a PIP plan, a performance improvement plan. You could be perhaps endangering yourself on maybe even getting the boot or getting fired. So it's very important that yes, for you to access the luxuries and benefits and the cash of working in a place like Netflix, you're going to be expected to work really hard and keep at it, because if not, your peers will overpass you. If you are uncomfortable being challenged by wide diversity of views, having ideas tested by debate and dissent, this is not for you. I think you find this just in corporate America. It's very important for you to be confident in your own views, but also expect that it will be challenged from other people. I think this gives you tougher skin. It gets you stronger, wiser, more experienced, and just, overall, it's mentally harder. The fluidity and the pace of change can really be hard for folks who thrive in more orderly and predictable environments. So what I hear from this is even for someone like a director, where it's very assumed that the higher that you go, the more cushy and the more you can just coast. Even for this person, they admit that you have to be on top of your game. Things can change, things go fast paced. It's almost operating like a startup, a smaller startup, and you have to be okay with that sort of environment. And if you won't, you're just going to be self-selected out, and you don't want to be in that situation again. It's all about, if you're applying to Netflix, really be crystal clear on who your manager will be, the dynamics, the communication. Will you be understood? How fast is the pace? How fast do things change and pivot? It will help you set yourself up for success. Advice to management: continue to invest in leadership, in diversifying the workforce and bringing more voices from more offices outside the US into the process, and keep courageous in the faces of challenges and competition. Keep leaning into unique stories that only Netflix would have the courage to put on screen. I think a lot of this is great advice. Oh boy, here we go. Oh boy, another 2 out of 5 stars. This was written quite recently, and a senior software engineer. A 1 star out of culture, a 2 out of diversity, 2 out of careers, 2 out of senior management. That's interesting about 2 out of diversity and inclusion. We just heard from the director of product design. They said it's extremely human and inclusive culture. Let's see. The pay when all engineers were senior engineers was higher than most companies. Most co-workers in the earlier cloud days were great engineers, extremely helpful. So the only pro this person can say is money. And that's the reason why a lot of people still remain at companies like Netflix, even though they might hate it. And that's unfortunate, right? And I hope, yes, change can happen. I hope it does. Cons: there is a great deal of politics between engineering orgs, even within engineering teams. Even with obviously outstanding performance, failing to play politics well will leave you unrewarded, while others with more political savvy will be rewarded for no work at all. Ultimately, the manager is free to be biased for and against employees for all reason. I hate office politics. I hope you do as well. Especially when it comes to engineers. I know so many engineers who don't care for becoming managers, who don't care about office drama and politics. They just want to code on innovative products and services that keep them mentally stimulated and challenged. That's all they want. And it's unfortunate that for you to excel, you have to now, again, depending on your team, depending on the org, you have to start playing these games, doing things that you don't want to do. And I think that's unfortunate, because then you're just being forced to have your back against the wall, and you either have to kind of play with how everything is functioning or operating around you, or if not, you just have to leave the company. But what if, you love the pay? What if there are certain aspects of Netflix that you love? And then you're at a crossroads of your life, and you're like, oh my God, Do I stay and be unhappy, or do I play this game, risk not being happy at all just to move forward? And it's a very tough place to be. If you've been in a similar situation in your career, please let me know. We'd love to hear how you navigated that. Engineering in some orgs tend to be non-technical, only doing project management. Although some non-technical managers might still be good managers, there are some that are horrible with poor project management skills and that don't even know what is happening in their own teams. The managers tend to be employed at Netflix for many, many years. Interesting. So maybe, again, don't want to generalize, but it seems like from this person's point of view, a lot of engineering managers are those that don't code, non-technical, only project management. And if you don't care for that, you're just never going to be a manager, or you're just never going to be promoted from within or just move forward at Netflix. And it's I guess, those who are non-technical that excel. And I think, again, this is unfortunate depending on the team and org. I think if you're an engineer, you're technical, you may have different opinions about this. I think typically, engineering managers is a natural progression in one's career. Like you are a really good IC, an individual contributor engineer, then you become a senior engineer, lead, staff principal, and then you become a manager. And so most managers have technical background. I don't know if they're hiring engineering managers with that technical background, or maybe these were ICs years ago. They just stopped coding for many, many years and then they got promoted. So I have a lot of questions here, but I know that for a lot of engineers who they consider themselves to be true engineers only because they're hands-on coding and they only want to be managed by someone that has that same background. If that doesn't happen, I can see a lot of friction happening, lack of respect, or like, hey, the managers just won't understand where we're coming from because we're technical and he or she's not technical. There is no career development support here. That's sad. It's unlikely that the current management will do any more as new lower engineer levels are added. As for the 360 review, it's best to avoid giving significant negative feedback as it makes coworkers defensive. Everyone is afraid of anything negative that can lead them to being fired. HR management advice on 360 is unrealistic and self-serving. It only helps management since some managers don't know what's happening on their own teams. Again, I think 360 idealistically is fantastic, right? Like you want to create a safe space where people can honestly talk about their experience, because if they're not transparent, if they're not obvious, how do you know if there are any issues? And then how from those issues can you actually implement or exact change? And so if people are not comfortable, or people are just withholding significantly, they're sugarcoating things, they're just blatantly lying, or just saying things that they know the other party just wants to hear, how can change actually happen if the receiving end doesn't actually hear about any real issues? Then there's no issues for them to address. And then this whole cycle just continues to perpetuate and no change ever happens. No evolution happens within the organization. Ultimately, Netflix is a large company where experiences will differ, obvious. Depending on which team and organization you work in, if you change teams and managers a few times, though, you'll encounter highly toxic situations. So again, as I'm always saying, it's all about the organization and team that you're on. For newer mid-level prospective employees, avoid Netflix since lower pay is likely not worth the extreme politics and toxicity. Interesting. So according to this person, which is fairly new, they're adding new levels for lower engineers, and they're like, hey, even for these lower engineers, it's not completely competitive. Netflix and Big Fang and big tech companies are known to be paying 90, 95th, top 1 percentile of salary or compensation in our industry. And it seems like by adding these new lower levels, they're not maintaining that kind of the pay ethos to these lower levels. And it seems like maybe it's dropping down. And even though it might still be competitive, maybe it's still not as high as like 90, 95 or 1%. But even if it is, the point this person is trying to make is that the politics is unreal. And if you're just a noob, entry level, a mid-level, a lower person who just wants good experience coding and pushing his or her career forward, maybe like it's just not worth it for you to go into a company like Netflix and just deal with all this drama. So again, I think this is very, very unfortunate. I also think it's very insightful to hear these, that, no matter how many times people talk highly about a company like Netflix, like any company, it will has its issues. And depending on what you do, the organization team, some might be better, some might be worse. But things that we're hearing about could be enough for a lot of people. When if you see and hear this video, like, wow, I had no idea about this. This will maybe second guess or make me take the whole interview process a lot more seriously, so that I ask the right questions before accepting any offer at a company like Netflix. Netflix, a model designer, 5.0 out of 5. Bet pays better than union minimums. Yep, Netflix pays well. The cons, the short seasons, which means only be employed for 6 months to a year. So I think if you're in a short-term contract, freelance type of role, please definitely keep this in mind. This also written quite recently. So yeah, you'll only be applied for 6 months or so at a time. Maybe that's kind of just like their internal metric, right? And so if that works for you, great. If that doesn't work for you, that's fine. If that does work for you, you can have Netflix on your resume. That can of course look good optically, and maybe help you just progress throughout your career, but it's up to you. This person, administrative assistant, 5 out of 5, great, their employees, good work-life balance. You have to negotiate for your pay. I think nothing here is a clear red flag. If you want a higher pay, negotiations is fairly standard, especially with companies that just do annual performance reviews. Netflix tagger, remote work is favorable. Promises are just that, promises, and should be kept. So yes, if you make really big promises, I hope that majority of them, even 50% of them, hold true. Because if not, then you don't want to be the boy who cried wolf and be in a situation or create some sort of culture where the team, the general workforce don't believe anything that you say. I think that's horrible for morale, horrible for the relationship between leadership and the rest of the company. It's very important to be transparent. It's very important to be concise in terms of like the goals that you and the company want to achieve, and then set the company and teams up so that they can hopefully make those changes happen instead of just pulling the rug or giving the feeling that you're pulling the rug underneath the feet and whatever you're saying, it just changes the next day. Partner engagement manager, big org with lots of changes. The compensation, although it's changing, is great. Lots of meetings, extremely political, tough to get cross-functional alignment because a lot of organizations or teams, they just don't get along or it's really difficult to communicate. But again, similar theme to what we heard earlier, lots of changes happening, lots of politics, and the communication needs to be improved on. All right, Netflix is not for everybody. This person, senior software engineer, 2019. So again, it was written several years ago. 3 out of 5, with the worst being work-life balance and culture. The best part of Netflix is that they try to pay 20% more than everyone else, so the compensation is good. They are not shy about spending money, so travel is business class, you'll get a new MacBook Pro, the people there tend to be very nice, the kid lunch is delicious, and so on. Wow, 20% more, first class, business class, new MacBook Pros every year, cater lunches. I mean, that sounds amazing. While there's still a lot of action in Los Gatos or Gatos building the technology, although arguably it is becoming mature, as streaming is a commodity, the real drama is in LA related to content. Cons. Netflix has very strange politics because people's jobs are at the whim of their manager. In other words, if a manager decides that a particular report is no longer a star, he or she will get a package. So given that employees are not stupid, there's a lot of kissing up. Ooh, man, that makes me cringe. I hate that. I hate sucking up and kissing up culture. It seems like leadership and managers have so much power and they control your career at Netflix. They control your job. And if you don't appease them, you're gone. That is ruthless, resulting in a lot of comedy. So I guess if you want to laugh, hey, go to Netflix after hours. Netflix believes in 360 feedback, but everyone I know only does that to their peers, and they become very political with their management chain. So it's seeming like it's a culture where it's based on fear and control. There's not so much transparency. And because of that, as anyone would, it'll be very difficult and comfortable to want to feel like you want to be transparent with your feelings, because if you know that if you are completely transparent, you could actually risk losing your job. And I think that's really, really unfortunate. And I think if that continues to happen, it's going to be very, very difficult for a company like Netflix internally to really change. Advice to management. It's creepy when management sends out letters to the report in red. Today is X's last day and I fired him or her because, wow, it's like, hey, we love you guys, but this person who a month ago I was saying this person's amazing, he or she just walked the plank and they're no longer with us. Then the rest of the team, how would you feel? Nail biting, oh my God, am I next? I think that is way scarier than a mass layoff, because any moment it could be you. The manager can just wake up and now you're in the crosshairs, and then if you do a couple mistakes, one mistake maybe your head could roll. I think that's terrifying. Well, that's it guys, and I hope you enjoyed this video. As no surprise, Netflix is a very prestigious company. A lot of people just want to get into and work at. And a lot of the good things that we've learned so far are ones that are come as no surprise. Good pay, good perks, fantastic, progression. Having that prestige on your resume will undoubtedly help you progress within your career in tech. But when it comes to the downsides and what Netflix can really, really work on, I think the aspects of just so much drama, so much politics, creating an environment where people feel like they can't be really honest and transparent, especially in an environment that should be safe, like a 360 degree, I think is really, really unfortunate. Again, you want to make sure that you take all these with a grain of salt, but the reason why I love sites like Glassdoor is it's an amazing way for you to kind of understand different perspectives and different people's experiences at working at companies like these. And I think, again, I do want to say, you do not want to generalize a company like Netflix or Amazon or Microsoft as companies that are just horrible and you have to be cutthroat to progress. It really depends on the org, it really depends on the team, it really depends on what you do there that can make your experience completely different than someone in a completely different department. So I really want to reiterate that and not paint Netflix in a certain way or another. If you've worked at Netflix, you know someone who works at Netflix, please drop a comment down below, share your experience, we'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, want to see more like it, if you have other companies that we should check out, please make sure you drop down below. We'd love to make a video on that as well. And please consider giving us a like, subscribe, click that bell, really helps a fellow recruiter. So thank you again, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one.